Good evening. Welcome to Plot Character Voice. I'm Gary Snodgrass, and we're going to finish up our section on plot. The fifth type of plot, the coming of age plot. The plot that deals with growth, character growth. I look at this plot, the coming of age plot, a little differently. This is a story around a person changing and coming to accept their role in society, coming to lose their innocence and accept the concept of being an adult. My idea is that the question of the story is, will this person grow up and be a good person? And we'll get into a little bit later about why this is such a powerful story or such a powerful plot. But I want to give you some concepts. It doesn't have to be a young person that grows up. This is my favorite and the best example is Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Stooge. This is a man who goes from being very self-centered through a series of events, and at the other end becomes willing to sacrifice for the betterment of the community. That's a key, that willing to sacrifice part. The realization they are not the center of the universe. The reason this is such a powerful story and such a powerful plot is because we all go through it. As children and teenagers, we have to change from a self-centered being to a adult who must come to realize they are not the center of the universe and that there will require sacrifices on their part if they are going to be an adult. And the more sacrifices you're willing to give, the better adult you are. This is everything from uh, sacrificing dreams for the betterment of your children, sacrificing pain to give children, to have children, sacrificing and accepting the reality that there are other people more important than yourself. And that's at the heart of the coming of age story. People need to grow into those roles. And how people achieve that, the story that propels them to that point, we find very interesting. Obviously, because it's coming to terms with death in the sense that your death might not be the most important death to worry about. There are more important things than your death. Death is inevitable. Those type of realities are all wrapped up inside the coming of age story. Um, like I said, Stooge is a perfect example. Alice in Wonderland. Um, it's usually a boy, a young man, who's goes on the adventure that changes, but not always. One of the reasons I think there's a difference between a male and a female in the coming of age stories is that females, young or girls, women, have a biological impetus to change. Okay, they are forced to grow up by biology. There is nothing forcing a young man to grow up. Um, so that's why I think the coming of age story usually is wrapped around the concept of the young man growing up. Um, if you think about it, in ancient times, for thousands and thousands of millennia, young men went through an initiation rite, okay, to help them go through this process. And because it exposes them to danger and shows them what is expected of them and helps them become a man of the community and all of those things that that entails, being a warrior, being a hunter, being a provider, a protector. That is the role they are expected to fulfill in a society up until recently. So, but it's ingrained inside of us. I mean, every young man worries about measuring up to the expectations. Every teenager, male and female, worry about becoming an adult. Will they succeed? Will they be good enough? This is why it is such an emotional story, because we've all been there and we've all failed at times. And we all know how close or how hard it was to change. So it creates a anxiety inside of us when we are reading that or watching or reading that story, so that it pulls at that emotion, that anxiety, the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, whatever it is. And watching that arc is very satisfying. So that's the emotion you're going for, is anxiety. This is why conflict is so important, especially in these type of plots, because it's the conflict that creates the change in the character, and it's the conflict that creates the anxiety inside of us that matches the anxiety inside the character. Now, granted, you can have a coming of age story inside a mystery, inside a romance, inside a thriller, inside a horror. Yes. But in a coming of age plot, that's the primary question. Will they grow up? Will they change? James Bond book never has a coming of age story. Okay, the character's not changing. He's not growing. Um, one of and there's lots of different ways of doing a coming of age story, but the typical and most common way is what's called the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell published this, I think, 1949. Other people have their versions of it. I've got my version of it. But there are some concepts inside the hero's journey that I want to talk about. Um, because this is such a common plot story process, it's important for you to understand it so that you can make changes, make adjustments, and understand. But you got to understand why those different aspects are inside the hero's journey. First off, like I said, it's a hero's journey because it's usually a story of a young man who needs to change. Okay, I mean, it's always some young farmer who gets called to train a dragon, or some young farmer who gets called to take on the empire, whether that empire's in space or in medieval Europe or wherever. It's a young man who must leave behind his old self and take on the new self. Um, that's why one of the key tropes, one of the key things, is what's called the reluctant hero. He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to take on all this responsibility. He doesn't want to be pulled into this world. Think of Star Wars, Luke turning it down, Frodo turning it down. Uh, it's that they don't want to be their world to change. They don't want to grow up. So that's why reluctant heroes it's important. Also, it's the conflict. If he wasn't reluctant, then he doesn't need to change. All right? He's already willing to change. It's by being reluctant that we show that he's not willing to change. Okay? That's why it's really a key part. The next part is a threshold. He's got to cross over some point into the unknown. Again, critical. It's the conflict of what we know is safe and remains the same and then stepping over into the unknown, which is the unsafe, which is chaos and or our future that we don't know what's going to happen. That is that threshold point is a critical point because it lets us know that's the beginning of the journey, the beginning of the change. If you don't cross that threshold, you cannot change. Another thing that I've noticed is that on a lot of that threshold is associated with water. I think because as a society, ancient societies, our territory was often bounded by water. This side of the river. The other side of the river was the unknown. This side of the lake, the ocean shore. Water had a habit of defining our boundaries. There's also a key aspect in that water is life. Without it, we cannot survive. So when you cross over and leave it behind, you are putting yourself at risk. And on a side note, they did a study years ago and about landscape paintings, and regardless of the culture, people liked a painting with a view preferred the painting most, a view from a hill looking over a grassy plain with a few trees and a river running through it. It was our sense of rightness. It's the sense from a purely animalistic point of view, our hind brain, it looks the most comfortable to us, the least dangerous. Got water, grassy plains, got animals to hunt, trees to get up into in case of danger, a hill so that we can see far and find dangers. So if that's the area that we find the most comfortable, leaving that type of area raises the stakes, okay? And raises the conflict. So he's crossed this, he's reluctant hero, decides to get into it, crosses the threshold, which is quite often a water barrier. At some point, there is a mentor involved. Critical. The mentor's role is to educate, guide, and inspire. And quite often has a mystical capability. And the mystical aspect is to show the main character, that there is something bigger than himself. Okay, it's the first introduction of the possibilities, of the danger, of the unknown. The mentor, a good example is Gandalf or Obi-Wan Kenobi or Merlin with King Arthur or Dumbledore and Harry Potter, but they're not always long beards and gray hair. They are a person of experience, a person who knows what it takes and has demonstrated repeatedly the ability to be an adult. They often have special skills that they are willing to pass on to the reluctant hero. They're vital to the story because they show the path to the ultimate goal, which is maturity and acceptance of responsibility. You can twist and turn all that mentor aspect all you want, but you need to have it in there in the sense of there's somebody as an example of what they want to become. I mean, think of Harry Potter. They want to become Dumbledore. Luke Skywalker wants to become Obi-Wan Kenobi. So they're a critical aspect. That's also a critical aspect of why they have to die. Dumbledore, Gandalf, Obi-Wan, Merlin, They all have to die because if they don't die, the hero cannot take their place. What it comes down to. It's the acceptance of their death and moving beyond that that is critical to our character. Also, the death of the mentor is a way to show the seriousness of the situation. The and if you quite often they will die as a sacrifice and as a way of demonstrating that that's the right thing to do. Okay? So, death of a mentor is critical and why it's important that it be done as a sacrifice. It's why when I was reading Harry Potter that I knew Dumbledore was going to have to die. But it makes the story. Without the death of Dumbledore, Harry cannot step up and become the person he needs to become. And if you think about it, it's like I always think, a tribe on the plains. Okay? Young man goes off and does an adventure, initiations and stuff like that. At a certain point, the men above him are going to die, and he has to step up into their place. Okay? He has to become the warrior. He has to become the leader, the one willing to sacrifice. He's the one who has to grow up. Can't do it as long as his father is there. As they say, no boy becomes a man until his father's no longer there. So that's the mentor part. Okay, then after the mentor part, there'll be adventures, try, fail, growing up. It can be gathering tools through quests to make the hero better so that he can take on the next challenge. It can be repeated fails. It can be different things that always make or help him grow. But at a certain point, he's going to be at the bottom, at the abyss, in the belly of the whale, in the deepest, darkest caverns. All hope is lost. It doesn't look like he's going to get out. And that's a critical part of the journey because you cannot come back and be redeemed unless you have failed ultimately. Okay? It also shows from the conflict perspective that it's not an easy task. It's also at our greatest fear if you place it in dark, cramped space. It's where doubt sits and resides inside of us, that eats away at us. It's a child would give up in that situation. An adult will overcome. That's the difference, okay? So he or she works his way out of the darkest abyss. And as a result gets the prize, whatever he was sent on for that journey. Critical that it be an actual physical thing. Because it serves as an abstract concept to achieving something that he can take back to the community. He's got to return to where he started from as a different person. And by doing so, improve the community. Bring back the gold. Bring back the magic elixir. Bring back the virgin. Whatever it is, he has to bring something back to the community. In the coming of age story, it's not the bringing back that is the ultimate goal. That would be a thriller. doing something to save the community. It's the change in the character that makes him an adult. Okay? Um, I mean, just think of Luke Skywalker, the beginning of Star Wars, and at the end. That arc, at the end of the 4, 5, and 6. I mean, at the beginning, he's a young farm boy farming water on some distant world. At the end, he's a Jedi Knight standing on a podium with a princess, receiving medals and being the hero of the entire rebellion. It's a huge arc, and if you'll notice, at the end, he is humble, quiet, and our concept of what a hero is. At the beginning, he's a cocky little kid who doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It's that journey that changes him into who he becomes. It's the redemption. It's the saving of the individual. I mean, of the community by the individual. This is controversial. I'll say it anyway. I honestly believe that in the deep down part of a person's soul or character or the innate part of who they are, the ones we admire the most are the ones who are willing to go out into the unknown, risk their lives, and bring back an improvement to the community. Okay? And it's the risking of their lives that is important. It's the hero that we talk about that's willing to sacrifice and risk themselves for the betterment of everybody else. So that hero's journey can be a vital way of illustrating a coming of age story, and it's probably the most common. There are others. An underdog story, which can be a hero's journey, but doesn't have to have all those things. But it's basically, it starts out as the lowest person on the totem pole, and through a bunch of adventures becomes the top person on the totem pole. It's the concept of rising from low beginnings to high endings. You will quite often see in a romance the poor girl marrying the rich guy, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, blah, 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 blah. And part of his attractiveness is his wealth, his social status. A poor boy doesn't have social status, and he can only get it one of two ways: wealth or being a hero, admiration. Okay? And when, as a society and as we evolved, women admired those two things: the man who can go gather wealth, provide, or the man who can be the hero, protect. And in the best world, do both. So a lot of my science fiction, it's funny, in my romances I'll have a poor girl and a rich man, and in my science fiction I'll have a rich girl and a poor man. And it's through his actions that he raises his social status enough or more than the girl to justify her being attracted to him. Now, she can be attracted to him the whole time, but it's by raising his social status through his herohood that we make it to where it's acceptable for her to be attracted to him. Like I've said, no princess ever fell in love with a poor accountant. They might fall in love with a poor hero who saved her life 6 times. So just take that into account when we're talking about the coming of age stories. And the coming of age is by proving their ability to be a hero, they justify the love of the princess, the virgin, the girl that everybody would want. Which is again getting back to what I was talking about from the very beginning. All plots revolve around death. The coming of age is to deal with the fact that you're going to die and you need to be willing to sacrifice for the greater good. The reward is the raise in social status and the better mate as a result. Okay? That's what's going on inside of us. A young boy knows they will not get a mate unless they can prove themselves and be accepted by other men. Fact. Okay? If they want a high quality mate, they need to be considered as a possible hero. In today's world, that can be difficult and controversial, but at a biological level, women prefer men that are heroic. Okay, and I don't know if I've ever told this story. The movie The Guardian, where the Coast Guard helicopter's flying out, and there's a lifeboat down there. Two people, a man and a wife, in the lifeboat. They lower the basket down, and the man starts to get in the basket first. Wife hits him, hates him, gives him a dirty look. They get them both up into the helicopter, and the two crewmen look at him and just shake their head because they know he's never going to be happy again in his life. His wife will never respect him, and it just showed that it's at the animal level that the female wants a hero for a mate, just like it's at the animal level the male wants a young, healthy, pretty mate. I'm talking to animal. I'm not talking, higher level thinking here. But those are what pulls at our emotions. Our emotions are not at a higher level; they're at the lower level. Okay, that's where the chemicals are released. That's where we can think about them, but when we feel them in the back of our brain, that's when the chemicals are released, and that's what grabs us on a story. You can have the most intelligent story in the world, but if there's no emotion, nobody cares. And a coming of age story is designed unintentionally to pull at our emotions. We've all been there. We all worry about what it took to get through that situation. We identify with the protagonist very easily because we've all been there. We were all young once, and even if we're old, we still realize there are parts of ourselves that need to constantly battle to be better. And like I said, that's why I like Scrooge so much, and I do call Scrooge or Christmas Carol a coming of age story. Another example is, and this is from a female perspective, is My Fair Lady or Pygmalion. Here's a young woman who must change and accept the new rules of her new situation. And it's only by giving in and accepting them that she's able to succeed. And then once she succeeds, she controls her destiny. Not a hero's journey story, although there's elements of it, but a underdog rising to become an adult. So that's why there's different ways, but the concept is: the main character, are they going to grow up enough to where they can be willing to sacrifice themselves? They are no longer the most important thing. And like I said, it's more common for boys because for girls, It's quite often taken out of their hands. Once they become a mother, or once they realize they can become a mother, they're forced to grow up. They are, I mean, the actual chemical releases in the brain for a mother when she sees her child, the maternal instincts and all those type of things are buried deep down inside of her. The same thing doesn't apply to a young boy. They have to learn. They have to voluntarily take on that heavy load. Um, and if you know of somebody who refuses to do that, you don't admire them. Peter Pan stays a young boy, and as a result is not admirable. We all know in our gut that it's not right. Now that we can fantasize, it would be nice to live like that for a short period of time, but we know that it's not the right way to live. At our gut. And that's what writing is at the gut level. Okay? You've got to get in there. And that's why the aspects of this plot are designed to show the protagonist, the main character, our hero, changing. You can't do it all at once because none of us do it all at once. I like to think it's that 14 to 18, 19 year frame that we all go through this. 5 years of puberty, 5 years of changing who we are, 5 years of accepting, 4 to 5 years of accepting that we are no longer children and taking on the adult responsibilities. Now that some people delay it till 22, 26, or 33, but those are not the people we admire. We admire the people who take on the responsibilities and take on the cloak of adulthood, who are willing to risk and sacrifice for the greater good. That's if at the end of the coming of age story, if the character has not reached that point, the story's not done. I don't care if they go through everything and at the end they're the same person that left. That's a terrible story, for one. Two, you need to have something else to make them change. That's the purpose of that type of story, is to make them change. If they go through all of that and they don't change, then you're James Bond or Superman or whatever. But it's not the same type of story. And as a writer, you need to know what type of story you've got. What's the main question? Will they change? Will they live long enough to change? Will they grow up? Okay? And take on the burden of being an adult. Okay, so as a refresher, we have our plots. Romance. Will they or won't they get together? In other words, will they or won't they create offspring that improves human society or keeps it going? Thriller. Will they or won't they save the community or the world? If they don't succeed, everybody dies. Again. Horror. Will they survive the night so that they can survive, go on and live? Mystery. Will they solve the murder so that there's no more death? And coming of age. Will they accept the responsibility and be willing to sacrifice for others? Those are the 5 plots in my mind. Now that you can spread out. Every plot's got 2 or 3 different ways of addressing it. Romance, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast. And then inside of that, you've got more different ways of expressing it. Science fiction, Western, Regency, contemporary, whatever. Then you've got even more ways of expressing it. uh, LGBT, interracial, um, old people, young people, um, all kinds of different ways of expressing one of those stories. Thriller, same thing. He's got to do this to save the town, or he's got to do this to save the world. Science fiction, historical, contemporary, military, um, comic books, it doesn't matter. They've got to save the world, somebody else. Horror, they've got to save themselves. Um, I like to think of it as small village on a savannah, 150 people. Romance. Are these two people going to get together so we can have children and keep the village going? Thriller. Is somebody going to defeat the tribe next door, the dragon in the hills, the crocodile in the water, the snake crawling through the grass, whatever it is? The lion pride outside the territory that keeps coming in and taking people at night. Whatever it is, that's the thriller. Is somebody going to go out and defeat? A horror is the individual going to survive. The threat is local, not that they have to go get it, it's come in. Mystery is, are we going to solve the murder before it happens again? And I believe it has to be murder, not death. In other words, it has to be committed by another person. Okay? Different than a thriller, which is external, horror, which is individual, mystery, which is somebody else in the community. Okay? See those three? And then coming of age, which is the concept of growing up enough to take on the responsibility of being an adult and be willing to sacrifice for others. Those are the 5 main plots, in my opinion. I'm going to go through some tropes next for. I think I'll do characters next. I'm going to start doing characters next. The type of characters in what story and why you would use them. What type of characters, why certain types of characters appeal to us. You can have a great plot, but if we don't give a crap about the characters, then there's no emotion. And our goal is the gut emotion, is to move the reader so that they feel, so that those chemicals are released in the brain. So we'll go over characters here next time. Thank you very much, and that is enough for right now.